B, 3 to 5 colleges, C, 8 to 12, or D, 15 to 25?
Looks like we've got some answers, and we've got some variation between B's, C's, and D's.
Okay, well, let's take a look at the answer. So the answer is C, 8 to 12, and here's why. You know, today's admission environment is very competitive, and you want to give yourself the best shot of being accepted. Of course, everybody would love that mentality of applying to one and being done, but the reality of that, you know, it seldom happens. You know, even 3 to 5 schools, depending on your school list, that may not be enough to give you a variety of admissions decisions. With 8 to 12, you should apply to schools that, you know, all 8 or, you know, to 12 of them, you should be happy to attend. And you also have to think about how much time and work goes into putting together a rather strong application. You know, there's multiple essays. So, you know, for answer D, 25 applications, is that realistic in the fall of senior year while you're trying to keep grades up? You know, you probably could apply to 25, but will the quality be there? And then lastly, you have to think about application fees adding up. You know, it costs anywhere from $40 to $75 per application, as well as you have to pay to send testing to each school. So it may not be a great idea to apply to 15 to 25. So make sure that, you know, for 8 to 12 colleges that you really truly do like them and you do see them as being a good fit.
I think I would also add that, you know, this is not the case for everybody. And so, for example, students from Texas who have the auto admit program, and you know for a fact that you can get in, you're in at UT Austin, for example, you might only apply to 5 other schools and take a shot at very competitive schools because you know you have that lined up for you. I'd also say that, like, maybe even a few years ago, we weren't saying 8 to 12, but because things have gotten so competitive and we've seen acceptance rates drop, you know, every single year, we just want our students to be, you know, giving themselves the best chance at succeeding. And so maybe whereas we would have said 8 to 10 a few years ago, we've kind of bumped that up to 8 to 12.
Absolutely. All right, another trivia question. Go ahead and respond. If you have the chat available to you, true or false, you should only apply to top ranked schools. Okay, seeing some responses, and it seems like everyone's coming to the consensus of false. Right, you should have a balanced school list made up of reach, fit, and safety schools. So let's talk about what, you know, what's a reach, what's a fit, and what do we consider a safety. So at Ingenious, we consider a reach a school where your test scores and your GPA fall below the school's middle 50th percentile. All schools publish that statistic, and so it's readily available for you to compare your GPA and your test scores to. You also need to kind of consider the overall acceptance rate of a university or college. If it's below 20%, this is a highly selective school. And so it's really a reach for, you know, all students. Fit is when your test scores or your GPA are within that middle 50%. You know, if it's closer to the higher end of the middle 50%, that would be ideal. And that the acceptance rate of the school hovers, you know, around 30%. And for a safety, this is when your test scores or GPA fall above the mid 50 percentile, and that the acceptance rate is above 50%. Okay. And so how would your counselor determine, you know, which schools are reach, which are fit, and which are safety for you? We look at that middle 50th percentile statistic that schools report, both for GPA and testing. I think it's important to keep in mind your demographic. For some demographics, you know, Asian students, international students, the expectation from the admissions office is that their testing is going to be a bit higher. So you shouldn't just rely on that overall middle 50% that an admissions office publishes. You should really kind of aim to be at the top of the middle 50 if possible. That's how you should consider your reach, fit, or safety. And then lastly, we look at the overall acceptance rate. Again, anything below 20% is not a safety school for anyone. It's really tough competition. So here's a little exercise with Fordham University. So Fordham's middle 50% on the ACT ranges from 27 to 31, and its overall acceptance rate is about 45%. So if you scored a 28, is Fordham a safety, a middle, or a reach school? You can go ahead and enter your thoughts into the chat. Yeah, I'm seeing some people entering in reach. It's because you're really on that lower end. You've hit that middle 50th percentile, but you're on the lower end of it. So if you scored a 31, Fordham then becomes a middle school for you, right? You're at that upper end you have of the 50th percentile for their ACT. And then obviously if you scored a 33, you're well above that middle 50th percentile. So Fordham is a safety school. Let's do another exercise. This is with the University of Chicago. Now they've published that their middle 50th percentile on the SAT is between a 1450 and a perfect 1600. Their acceptance rate this year was 7.2%. So if you scored a 1450 on your SAT, what would Chicago be? Is it a foundation? Is it a safety, a middle, or a reach? Go ahead and enter your thoughts into the chat box. Okay. Right, I see some people stating that it is a reach. Absolutely, the 1450 is on the lower end of the middle 50th percentile. Now what about for this second scenario? If you scored a 1550, is UChicago a safety, a middle, or a reach? All right, I see a couple different responses. I see some that say middle, some that say reach. It's actually a reach because of that very, very low acceptance rate. This is one of those examples with, even though, your 1550 puts you at the higher end of their middle 50th percentile, the acceptance rate is so low and the competition is so great. It is a reach for everybody. Even for the last situation, if you have a perfect 1600, it still means that at least 25% of the students admitted also had a 1600, if not more. So it is a reach for anyone that applies.
I think I'll also share on one of our other PowerPoints that we do sometimes. We share that 69% of students applying to Stanford with perfect scores are rejected. So again, even if you have a perfect score, UChicago is incredibly competitive, as are the other top 10, top 15 schools, and they are reaches for everybody.
Absolutely. Right, so there's the big takeaway. Anybody that applies to the University of Chicago, it is a reach school. So to summarize, you should apply to somewhere between 8 to 12 schools. Your college list should be balanced using realistic and accurate definitions of reach, fit, and safety schools. And the top schools are reaches for everyone.
So next we'll break down the criteria. So how do you even decide, where to apply and what factors should you be evaluating? So these are the factors that we help students consider when they're trying to build their school list. They are not in order of importance. I think that families have different priorities, students have different priorities, and so this is just the order that it is listed in for the purpose of this presentation. So we will go through all of these individually, and we will start with rankings and reputation. So rankings and reputation are, a lot more important to some families than others. And I think that it's important to really look at different types of rankings and not just build your school list based on, U.S. News and World Report. I get that, college is a big investment and it kind of sets you on your path for the rest of your life. But it's important to take rankings and reputation with a grain of salt. So what do we think about this one? UT Austin is ranked higher for business than Cornell. So do we think the business program at UT Austin is better than at Cornell? What does everybody think? True, true. Okay, good. So this is true. So even though, Cornell is an Ivy League school, for undergraduate business programs, Austin is ranked number 5 and Cornell is ranked number 14, or I can't see that, is ranked number 7. And in the overall rankings, so UT Austin is ranked number 56. But if we look at specific business rankings, then Cornell is ranked number 14 overall. So it's important to look at, we'll get there later. True or false? Columbia is higher ranked for engineering than UIUC. What do we think about this one? Okay, so this is false. Engineering, Columbia is ranked number 18, while UIUC is ranked number 6. So if you are interested in engineering and that is a career you want to pursue, you should keep in mind that, department-specific rankings are important to evaluate. So not just looking at overall rankings. I think that if a student had the opportunity to get into both of these schools, it's definitely a conversation we would have in terms of what is better for your career trajectory and things like that. But for engineering department specifically, UIUC is higher ranked. So in addition to overall rankings, we really encourage students to look at department-specific rankings to see the resources and the kind of strength of the curriculum in their specific major or department. What do we think about this one? True or false? So national universities produce twice as many PhD students in STEM-related fields than liberal arts colleges. We've got some falses. We've got a true. Got some truths. All right, so this is actually false. So per capita, liberal arts colleges produce twice as many students who earn a PhD in science than other institutions. So I think that a lot of times people don't quite understand liberal arts colleges because of their reputation, and they think it's kind of like a softer education. But in reality, these liberal arts colleges have so many opportunities for students to do research with professors as undergrad. Because a lot of these colleges don't have graduate schools, there are not graduate students on campus who are taking up all of the research positions. So there is a lot of opportunity for students to work very closely with professors to gain exposure in their field of interest and kind of develop a very specific skill set that they later want to pursue in a PhD program. So we don't want you to dismiss liberal arts colleges because they are not on the National University's ranking list or because of any other things that you think about them. They are very good for students to get, they have a lot of benefits, but one of the things that they're very strong in is allowing students to do research at the undergraduate level. So if we look at the rankings, they have a lot of flaws, and kind of the backstory behind U.S. News and World Report was, they were a magazine and they were starting to not do as well financially, and so they created this ranking system to kind of drive more revenue. And so it's important to understand the actual factors that go into making these rankings and to see which factors they don't consider. So They look at the faculty resources, they'll look at yield rate, they'll look at student selectivity, they'll look at how much money the school has, they'll look at how much money alumni give back to the school, and things like that. And it's important to know what they don't look at. They don't take into consideration the cost of tuition. They don't take into consideration the size of the school or the campus environment, or employment rates beyond college. So those are all extremely important factors that students should be considering when they're creating a school list. And we just want to make sure that students aren't starting their list by only looking at the rankings, because they're only one factor to consider when creating a list. So again, these are helpful tools. They're helpful to get a sense and to start building your school list and to look and start doing research. But students shouldn't build their list off of rankings alone. There are many, many other factors to be considered, like academics.
All right, so academics. Does the school offer the academic resources and opportunities necessary for you to achieve your goals? You want to make sure that a school has the type of program or the major that you're interested in, or something, along the lines that can help you achieve your kind of future goals, for sure. But you shouldn't just, look at a major and minor list. There's other factors to consider. The curriculum, or how the content is delivered. The faculty, of course, any special programs that the university may offer, and then the school schedule. So how to narrow your search by curriculum. Josefa mentioned in the previous slides, we have liberal arts colleges versus national universities. In the US, we have specialized colleges within rather large universities. So a place like Penn State has a college of engineering, a college of business, a college of arts and sciences. They also could have pre-professional schools within universities, a college of nursing or dental science. There are some institutions that have extremely special focuses, art colleges, colleges with specialized missions, or colleges that have a religious affiliation. And then the last thing to think about when you're searching by curriculum is the course or distribution requirements. Liberal arts colleges are known for having a core curriculum. So that's a third of your classes, usually in most cases, are part of a core curriculum because they believe in providing a well-rounded education. A lot of large state universities have distribution requirements. You have a lot of choices about what you can take, but again, a good percentage of your curriculum will have to fulfill these distribution requirements. So you need to determine whether that's right for you. And then there are some universities like Brown University that's completely open, completely flexible, and allows the student to be the architect of their own education. So the student, the family needs to figure out which one would be right for the student. And it might be several of these, but you need to understand, what does the curriculum look like? Looking at major is really a popular way to determine whether a school's a good fit. You want to consider, what are the different majors available? Does the school have your major? Do the available classes sound interesting to you? I always have students look at a course catalog from the previous year. That's all online. You can look up the classes, and you can determine whether it excites you or not. You have to keep in mind that at most universities, the 100, 200 level classes for any particular major are quite common and are pretty much covering the same material. But when you get into the electives, the 300, the 400 level classes, that's when they start to differ. And students should look, are they exciting to them? Can you design your own major? Is there flexibility within the major? How big is the department? If it's too big, maybe you won't have a lot of access to advisors or to professors. If it's too small, you might worry about the funding in the department. So knowing the size of the department is a good idea. And then are there minors or double major options at the university or college? So there's lots of resources out there to help you select schools by majors. So right here, this is an example of the FIS Guide for Colleges. It's really well organized. You can see on this slide, small colleges and universities that are strong in music, or if you're interested in environmental studies, it kind of lays out for you those schools that have the strongest departments. This is really something that I recommend students to review. We all have a copy and consult this as well. So it's a really great tool. Students with strong academic interests should also narrow their college search by evaluating the faculty members in their area of interest. Research the thought leaders in your academic area of interest and see where they teach. I think seeing the school's faculty page would be, see who's teaching your classes, read their bios, see what research they're doing. And remember, there are faculty members everywhere, great faculty members everywhere, regardless of the university's rankings. And then I think for students that have multiple interests, I think they sometimes feel the pressure that they might have to choose just one major, and they consider narrowing their searches. Instead, I think you should look for options where there are specialized programs that promote, an interdisciplinary or dual degree program, or a dual enrollment program. There's lots of different options where you can study. You might have an engineering background and a business background, and there are some programs out there that allow you to do both instead of choosing one or the other. There's also programs that are direct admit programs for students. That's typically for medical school. So Brown, for example, has a direct admit program to medical school, or early assurance programs. If you do your undergraduate program here, you will then be able to go on to medical school or a master's degree program elsewhere, or deferred enrollment programs. So here's an example. UPenn has a lot of interesting interdisciplinary programs. I mentioned the example of, being interested in business and engineering at the same time. So they have the M&T, Jerome Fisher Program in Management and Technology. You don't have to choose one or the other. You actually get to do both. Another popular program that I see on here, the Huntsman Program in International Studies in Business. I will say these programs are certainly popular, and they're very competitive to get into because they're quite special and unique, but definitely worth looking into. Dual enrollment programs. So Brown, if you want to study at Brown, but you also have some excellent artistic skills and want to consider getting a degree from RISD as well, you can do that. You do have to apply to both universities and be accepted at both schools, but it's a dual enrollment. Harvard has the same thing with Berklee College of Music, and then Bard and Columbia, Amherst, and Dartmouth have a similar agreement for engineering. Some examples of the direct admit or early assurance programs. So I mentioned Brown's PLME program in liberal medical education. This is a wonderful opportunity if you're a high school student who has an extreme background in medicine or the sciences, and you know that you want to go to med school, you can try to apply to this program. And it means that not only would you be accepted to Brown for your undergraduate studies, but that you already have a place at their medical school. And so that leaves your undergraduate time to really kind of focus on your research or volunteering or studying abroad, instead of having to worry about taking the MCAT or applying to other medical schools. Your place is assured if you can get into this program. Boston University also has a similar program where you're admitted for a BA and then you move on for your MD. Early assurance programs, students applying during college, and often they can bypass the graduate school testing. So an example, Georgetown has one for law school. There's some other medical school programs at Georgetown, Tufts, Mount Sinai. And then deferral enrollment programs. Students apply during college and defer enrollment post-graduation. So Harvard's 2+2, Yale's Silver Scholar Program. So look for these interesting opportunities. Don't just focus on the major list, but look what else is available. And then the last thing I think that students need to think about is a school schedule. You know, some colleges and universities operate on a quarter system, others on a semester. So the advantage of a quarter system is that there's greater flexibility, more opportunity to major and minor in different subjects. You have shorter winter and spring breaks, so that means more time to focus on academics. But it does mean less time to focus on a specific subject because you would only be in classes for a shorter period of time in a quarter system, sort of like some high schools operate. The semester system is quite common. There's more time for collaboration between faculty, students, and peers. You obviously have longer exposure to subject matter and more time to adjust to university life. There's increased instructional time and, you know, increased time to get to know your instructor, but there's less flexibility and major options. So here's an example. Colorado College has a really unique schedule. They take one course at a time, just one, and it's pretty intense. It lasts 3.5 weeks, but that's the only thing that a student is focusing on. They're diving really deeply into one subject matter. It's also unique because you're only enrolled in one class. Sometimes your professor may take you abroad because he or she knows that you're not scheduled in other classes and you don't have other commitments to classes. So there's some really interesting things that you can do at a place like Colorado College when you only have to focus on one class at a time. So how do you learn about all of these different academic options? You know, obviously each college or university has a department's website. I mentioned previously the course catalog, I think, is an invaluable resource. U.S. News and World Report has by department specific rankings, so you can see which university departments are really well known. And then, of course, college guidebooks, like I mentioned, the FISC guidebook is great for that kind of thing.
I'll also add that it's extremely important to have intimate knowledge of the academic opportunities at a school when it's time to start writing supplemental essays. So once you do have your school list and you're going through the application process, these schools are going to ask very specific questions about why you want to go to their school, why you want to major at a specific major, and having gone through these, you know, exercises and going through all of these resources will help you have, you know, more specific and tailored answers to these essay questions that do matter a lot in terms of like demonstrating your fit for a particular school.
Okay, so here's a group exercise. Meet Sarah. She's a strong student with competitive scores. She likes business and science and wants to pursue both. She has great leadership and lab experiences. One day she wants to start her own company. Where should Sarah apply? So if I were working with a student like this, I think what stands out to me, you know, obviously it seems like she's very competent academically, but she has two really unique interests that she seems to like easily, you know, likes equally, business and science. She wants to continue both. So I might look for some of those interdisciplinary programs for Sarah. She also has great leadership and lab experience, so I might look for a place where she can continue working in a lab that has lots of opportunities for undergraduates and research. And one day she wants to start her own company. So I would definitely look for universities with strong business programs or that have, you know, lots of extracurricular types clubs related to, you know, entrepreneurial endeavors. So where should she apply? If I were putting together a list, you know, in the REACH category, the Penn M&T program that I mentioned. There's a similar one at Berkeley that would be worth exploring. FIT, University of Michigan, it has, you know, those individual colleges within the university. There's a business college, there's an engineering and science college. That would be a great fit. USC is the same way. Emory, Lehigh, and then safeties, UT Austin and Bucknell. All right, here's another example. Luke is passionate about creative writing and history. He's a good student at school with strong scores. He lives in Virginia. Where should he apply? Looking at Luke, you know, I think we want a place that fosters both his creative, artistic side with writing, but also has, you know, a strong college of arts and sciences so that he can have a solid background in history and historical research. He lives in Virginia, so I would argue that his public university would be a good place to start, with the University of Virginia. Let's see the list. Okay, University of Virginia is on there as a fit for him. But read Johns Hopkins. You know, you might think Johns Hopkins and you might think about their STEM programs, their engineering programs. You know, if you do some research, Hopkins has a wonderful, wonderful creative writing program as well as their STEM programs. Columbia, you know, you can get a very well-rounded education. They have a core curriculum for someone like this student who likes history, who likes writing. A core curriculum might be the right fit for them. Amherst as well. Some of the fit colleges, Kenyon, Wesleyan, Tulane, University of Virginia, and safeties, University of Arizona, Bard College, and Sarah Lawrence. All right. The next factor that you should consider when putting together your list and considering fit is location and school size. True or false? Duke is located in the South. Anybody want to chime in? It is located in Durham, North Carolina, which is considered the South. So, ways to, when you consider the location, I think students often start with city size. Some students are looking to be in, you know, a metropolis like New York City, like Boston, like Los Angeles. But you should also consider regional culture. You know, going to school in New England could look very different than going to school in the South. Weather is definitely important for some students. You know, somebody that is from Southern California applying to the University of Rochester might be shocked by the weather and how much snow. Admissions is also going to think about that at a place like Rochester. They will think, will somebody from California come here and be comfortable with the difference in weather? Distance to home. You know, some students want to come home often, others do not, but it is a factor to consider. And then transportation options, especially if you are going, you know, if you're going to be going across the country, how often will you get to go home and how much will that cost over time? So for major cities, you know, that's usually the population, 1 million or more. There's usually an airport that's a hub for international flights. So as I mentioned, New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Houston, Philadelphia, and San Diego. Mid-sized cities are usually populations with several 100,000. So San Francisco, Boston, Seattle, Washington, D.C., Portland, Miami, and Atlanta. Suburbs are usually located a quick drive away from a city or a smaller sized city. So, for example, the University of Maryland College Park, that is considered a suburban campus. It is just outside Washington, D.C., but it is suburban because it's a quick drive away. And then you have small cities and towns where there's a population of a few thousand or tens of thousands. And the college or university tends to really impact those communities a great deal. Okay, so the University of Virginia, here's an example. Here's some statistics about Virginia. It is the #1 happiest city in America, according to Charlottesville is, according to the U.S. National Bureau of Economic Research. It is the #1 best college town in America, according to Travelers Today, and it is #5 for U.S. Community for Well-Being, according to a Gallup index. So location of this campus is everything. It seems to, affect everything from well-being to happiness, to, which would have a great impact on the college experience of any student. True or false? Caltech is considered a medium-sized school. It's roughly the same size as MIT. I'm seeing a couple unsure, true, some falses. Okay, falses I think are winning here. It is false. Caltech is actually very, very small, right? Under 1,000 undergraduate students, whereas MIT has 4,500. We think of both of these schools being, powerhouses when it comes to the STEM field and research, but you would have a very different experience at each one because of the size of the student population on campus.
I mean, 939 is that is like a high school.
Right. 200, 250 students in your class. You're going to get to know everyone really well.
Yeah.
So, I often have students, when we're beginning to make a list, make a chart that looks like this, so that they can understand which schools are very small, which are smaller, which are medium, and which are large. So very small, we consider that under fewer than 2,000 students. So we gave you the example of Caltech, but Amherst, Pomona, and Bowdoin are also under 2,000 students. Small schools are fewer than 5,000 students. So Hobart, Colgate, Grinnell, and Reed, typically liberal arts colleges, some smaller universities fit into that category. Medium colleges, a lot of students are drawn to the idea of a medium college or university, 5,000 to 15,000 students. A lot of your Ivy League universities fall in that range, so Yale, Brown, Duke. But there are some state universities that are on the smaller side, so University of Arkansas, University of Montana, University of Vermont, are on the smaller side for a large state university. And then large universities are over 15,000 students. So UCLA, Michigan, Michigan State, and University of Texas at Austin. Okay, so the pros of going to a small college: smaller class size, which means more interaction with professors. It's easier to make friends and to know people in your classes. And there's a stronger sense of camaraderie and community. There's also usually a stronger advising system. There might be more flexibility because your advisor, your professor. You can simply have a conversation if you need something changed or you need some help with something. And there is lots of leadership opportunities. They need people to step up and be leaders on campus. The cons is usually there's fewer research facilities than at larger universities. Smaller student population, of course, means smaller alumni network. There's, some would say there's less variety in your social life. There may be no large sporting events. There may be fewer major choices. It could feel isolating at times, and there's probably less variety in your housing options. Big schools, the selection of majors is going to be huge. If you go to a place like Michigan and you decide to change your major, they're probably going to have something else that you like. There's going to be more research facilities, more extracurricular activities. In fact, I was doing some research with a student on Penn State earlier today, and there is literally 1,000 clubs, registered student clubs on campus. Unlimited social opportunities, for sure. More housing options, and they tend to attract distinguished faculty members. The con, less attention from professors. You could walk into, a freshman class and have 300, 400, 500 people in an amphitheater with you. Obviously, you're not going to get to know your professor that way. You're going to have to make some effort. You might be limited by administrative hassles. The bigger the university, the more likely it is a bureaucracy. So you kind of have to follow all their rules if you want to make changes. You're less likely to have someone hold you accountable. If you don't show up to class, the professor's not going to notice. Whereas at a smaller university, they might reach out to you and say, I noticed you weren't in class, hope everything's okay, here's what you missed. And it is easier to get lost in the crowd. Okay, so here is a group exercise related to location and school size. Julia does not want to go to a big school. She also really does not like cold weather. She has great grades, strong extracurriculars, and impressive volunteer experiences. But Julia has relatively weak standardized test scores. Where should Julia apply? If anybody has any thoughts, go ahead and enter them into chat. All right. Well, a small size college, I hear somebody saying. Right, definitely a small size college. So here's a list that might work for Julia. Scripps College, Emory, Pitzer College as a reach. Fit could be GW University, Occidental. Safety, perhaps Elon or Sewanee. These would fit all of her needs. And then the standardized testing piece, we see some of these universities, GW, for example, is test optional, Pitzer's test optional. So there are ways around highlighting her strengths and not including the standardized testing and still having some really interesting schools for her to apply to. All right, extracurricular activities, because students aren't in the classroom all the time. They want to make sure that they're going to have something to do. So students should consider their searches by student group opportunities. They should look at academic opportunities, arts, athletics, cultural opportunities, Greek life, outdoor opportunities. There's a whole range of things students can get involved in. So here's an example, George Washington University. You can see they have, and every university has this, but they have a catalog of their student organizations. You can see there's a directory of student orgs that you could explore. So if we were to click on that directory of student orgs, what we would see is, I believe on the next slide, so they're listed alphabetically. And I have my students explore this just as they're exploring academic majors. I also have them explore what will you get involved in on campus. Again, as Josefa said, you are going to have to write about this for a lot of universities. Or in interviews, how do you see yourself contributing to the university? And so clubs and different extracurricular activities is one way to get involved. So another thing some students are interested in is study abroad opportunities. I think there are some questions that you should look at because not all study abroad opportunities are created equal. One is what percentage of students study abroad? How many study abroad programs does the school have? Does the school partner with other universities for study abroad? And that gives you even more options. Can you study abroad during the school year and summer? You get college credit. That's a big one. That is certainly a big one, especially for parents. You want to make sure that it's not just a vacation, that you are getting college credit for your experience abroad. And then how long are the study abroad programs? Some students want to go for a year. They like that idea. Others just are more comfortable going for a few weeks. So definitely looking into what options any study abroad office has is important. So here's a good example. Tufts makes it easy for their students to study abroad. Half of them do. And they really have it well organized. You can, search by the area of study. So if you're an engineering student that wants to study abroad, you can see that they have 3 programs, one in Ghana, one in Hong Kong, and one in London. And then they also have it organized by term. So if you're one of those students that love the idea of being away for a full year, they tell you which programs would allow you to do that. And then, they have other options, just semester programs or a summer program. Athletics can be very important for some students. Some students may want to continue playing a sport in college, and so that's a part of their process, and that's a big factor when it comes to fit. The student athlete has to determine whether they want to be a varsity athlete, whether they want to play in a club sport, which is still relatively competitive, or intramural, which is more fun, and sometimes it's an opportunity to try out a new sport. When it comes to varsity sports, of course, deciding whether Division 1, 2, and 3 is right for you. Although, Division 1, they will approach you and let you know if that is right for you. Of course, there's scholarships that come with Division 1 that aren't available for Division 3 athletes. That's an important factor to know. Considering the competitiveness of teams, if you were a Division 1 football player at Brown University, the level of competitiveness, I think, would be a bit different than if you were a Division 1 football player at Ohio State. And also your sports culture at that university. So Ohio State sports culture, for example, it's a big part of the university. Students regularly go to athletic events. I'm not saying that they don't at Brown, but it's just not as big a part as the university culture as it might be at a Big Ten school like Ohio State. Here are some schools that are known for a particular sports culture. So, basketball, of course, Duke and UNC are very competitive. Football, USC, Notre Dame, Michigan. Hockey, if you love hockey, Boston University, Boston College have great teams. Baseball, UT Austin, lots of colleges and universities in the South. No surprise there, they have great baseball teams. And if you like lacrosse, Maryland is a good place to look.
I'll also add that the Yale men's lacrosse team just won the national championship. So maybe next presentation we'll add Yale there for lacrosse.
Absolutely. Okay, another factor is internship and work opportunities. This is becoming more and more important for students and families. The value of a co-op and internships is that it links classroom learning with paid or unpaid employment experiences. And work placements are related specifically to the academic studies of each student. So there's a little bit of a difference between a co-op and an internship, and I think sometimes the terms are just used interchangeably, but there is a difference. So universities that have co-ops means that their students will stop taking classes, whether that's for a semester or a year, to go work full-time. The students are typically paid during this time. They're paid a salary by the employer that they're working for. And it lasts 3 to 12 months. So it could be a semester position, it could be a 1-year position. And it's usually required as part of that school's curriculum. So a place like Northeastern or Drexel, they have strong co-op programs, and it is the expectation that students will complete at least 2 practical learning experiences outside of the classroom. And then students are typically out of class and working for at least a full school year throughout college. The internship is a little bit different. Internships sometimes can be paid, but there's plenty of unpaid internships out there these days. And they range from 2 weeks, so it's something that you could do in the summer, or it could be a semester-long experience, up to 6 months. Sometimes it's done part-time, so students can attend classes. You could schedule your classes on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then, work at your internship on Tuesday and Thursday. And I'm going to have Yosefa talk about social factors.
So this is kind of meant to be a little joke, but I think that many parents in the US will tell students before they go off to college or before they apply to college that college will be the best 4 years of your life. And I think that finding a place where you will have a great time and enjoy is, extremely important to your success. There are a lot of studies that, directly correlate happiness with success in the classroom and beyond the classroom. So finding a place where you are going to have fun and enjoy is extremely important. So questions to kind of evaluate when you're thinking, is this a good place for me to go? Will I like it here? Is like, which clubs would you join on campus? How do students give back to the college's local community? Is there Greek life on campus? So if you're the type of student who knows you want to be in a sorority or a frat, then you'll definitely want to narrow your search by colleges that have Greek life, because some don't. Does everybody go to football games? Like at many schools like USC and Michigan, students wake up on Saturdays every single day and they go to the tailgate, and that's just a huge part of the social culture. And so if that's something that's important to you, then you'll probably not want to go to a liberal arts college, and you want to go to a school that has a strong football program. It's also important to ask, how is housing assigned? At Yale specifically, their housing system is a huge part of the culture at Yale. So we have our residential colleges. Students are assigned, a college before they come to campus, and it's kind of part of your identity on campus. So when I run into other alums from Yale, one of the first questions that they'll ask me is oh, what college were you in? And that's just part of your identity as a Yale student. So, looking at housing assignments and how dorms work is important. Some schools will allow you to pick your roommate and kind of coordinate before you get to campus, and some schools you just have a random roommate. So making sure that you're going to be happy and that you're going to succeed in this type of housing environment is something worth considering and evaluating. And these are all things that you can definitely ask and find out on campus tours and also on websites, of course. So it's also a good idea to look at some forums and review sites. Nowadays, everything gets reviewed. So you can kind of take a look at these forums and see what real students are saying, like student testimonials about their colleges. So you'll get some insights about Cornell here. You get some insights about UChicago here. So, UChicago is meant to be very rigorous academically, and it's also very cold in the winter. And I think those combinations sometimes, lead to students struggling a bit at times. And so those are important things to understand before wanting to go to a school like that. So seeing what real students are saying about their school is, extremely important. I think also talking to graduates from schools, people feel, you can tell how much somebody liked a school when you ask them about it and see what their reaction is to your question. So I think that is a good way to see if it, what student experiences were like at different schools. All right, so let's go through this quick group exercise. So Sam is a good student at school. He's got a lot of different extracurricular activities. He's outgoing. He loves hanging out with his friends and watching sports. He doesn't want to go to a small school. He thinks he wants to major in economics. So when we see a student like this who's super outgoing and the social factors are a big part of the college experience and the factors we're considering for a school list, but he's also a good student. There are schools that are, great schools academically, but also are known to be, a lot of fun to attend. So in this list, we'll say our reach schools will be Duke and Vanderbilt and Notre Dame. Those are all extremely competitive schools. So Duke, I think, was ranked number 8 last year. Vanderbilt and Notre Dame were in the top 20. They're also, really great at sports, and they're meant to be like, fun universities. Fit, Michigan, USC, UNC, Boston College, Safety, Lehigh, University of Florida, and University of Miami. Then we're going to look at some tips and resources for you all to start building your school list. I'll continue. I'll just go through this because I know that we're running a little bit long on time here. So there are a lot of resources online for students to look at. We talked about rankings. We talked about websites, guidebooks. Virtual campus tours are really cool, and a lot of websites will have it. And it's like, if you don't have the time or, the financial ability to visit all of the schools that you're interested in, like, doing these virtual campus tours are super helpful. Online college searches and current students and alumni, social media pages. Offline, obviously, there are a lot of opportunities as well. So you can go to college fairs, visit colleges. When you're visiting colleges, I encourage you to attend a class. I encourage you to do your college visits during spring break instead of summer when the students are on campus, so you can kind of get a real vibe for the campus. Online information sessions and, talking to current students, talking to alumni. These are all things that students should be doing to kind of build their school list. I think looking at social media pages is something that's definitely worth doing. You can learn a lot about a school this way. They're constantly posting about cool things their students are doing or cool resources that they have, speakers who are coming to campus, things that they're proud of, and this is a really good way to get to know a university. I'll also highlight here, looking at YouTube pages, a lot of times they'll have interviews with students, they'll have tours with students, they'll broadcast events on YouTube. So this is a good way to actually use technology to your advantage, and just instead of going to visit a school, watching all of these videos and consuming, as much content as you can, and kind of being a sponge, seeing if this is a good fit for you. And then if you do decide to apply, to have more concrete knowledge about schools to add to your supplemental essays later on. So I will go through this example of how we have helped a student build a school list quickly, and then we will open it up to questions at the end. So student X didn't know where she wanted to apply to college. We first, we have this questionnaire that we will send to students, and we'll ask them to do a self-evaluation, and we'll ask a lot of different questions. Small school, big school, do you care about the weather? Any idea what you want to major in? How far away do you want to be from your family? Do you know what you want to do after college? Lots of different questions. And we'll collect this information from a student. We will also, we really understand that school list, especially as a family process. And a lot of times parents have their own thoughts about where they want their child to go. And they also have some different perspectives and are able to add things that maybe the student hasn't yet realized. So we'll ask parents to fill out a questionnaire as well. And we'll kind of, take this knowledge to, start making our suggestions for a school list. So for this student specifically, we created a list of 10 very different schools and asked the student what she liked and didn't like about the schools. So when students come to us and they have no idea where they want to apply, it's helpful to send them very different types of schools and have them see which ones they like and which ones they don't like, because from there we can send them more recommendations that are similar to the schools that they like, and we can kind of knock things off that way. So here's a look at the very different schools that we sent her. Based on this questionnaire results, we made a spreadsheet, and we asked the student to say yes, no, or maybe. That's not a very strong commitment, but it is, an easy exercise to get some colleges eliminated from the list. And we created, the school list is something that evolves over time. It is set to change from 9th grade all the way through, at the last minute when you're applying December of your senior year. So Right now, we're working with students on their school list for our rising seniors, but this is also an exercise that we'll do with some of our younger students to make sure that they are kind of getting to know different programs and different schools and kind of figure out what they're looking for in a college experience. From there, we'll create like a very detailed spreadsheet for our students with, you know, all of the statistics for these different schools so that they don't have to do, you know, that part of the research, and we can kind of categorize them by reach and fit and safety schools in order to build our list of 8 to 12, you know, a balanced list of 8 to 12. Lots of details. So does this school require subject tests? Is it test optional? What's the code for sending the SAT scores? What are the deadlines? Is it November 1st? Is it November 15th? Is it October 15th? What's the application fee? What's the ED versus EA policy? Do they, you know, have interviews on campus versus like alumni interviews on the phone? We want to make sure that we're getting all of the details so that our students are, you know, have everything that they need and can just focus on the work that is creating the college application. So this particular student got into Cornell. So a little bit more about the results that we've accomplished that we're super excited about. This past year, we had 2 students get into Princeton, 1 into Harvard, 4 into Yale, 3 into Stanford, 5 Columbia, 9 into Penn, 5 into Cornell, 5 into Dartmouth. So super proud of these results. Looking at the top 10, we've got Duke in here. I think we had 8 or 9 students get into Duke, 1 into Caltech. So a lot of work went into this, and we're very proud of our results. Obviously, we don't just work with students applying to the top schools. We work with students of all different levels, all different abilities, all different goals, and our goal is to help students kind of get into the best fit school for them, and to help them kind of get into a better school than they would have gotten into without our help, I would say. So here are some of our other results from other schools on the list. And here is a quick explanation of the different programs that we offer. So our candidacy building program is, you know, you're working with our team, a former admissions officer and a graduate coach ahead of time. So starting in 9th grade, we are helping students identify their interests, explore their interests, find cool and unique opportunities to support those interests, picking their classes, planning out their standardized tests, planning their summers, making sure they have, you know, they're doing everything possible to stand out in the admissions process so that when it is time for them to apply before, you know, the summer before senior year, they've really positioned themselves to succeed in the process. We also offer academic mentorships. So this is one-on-one research with a professor, researcher, or scholar in a certain field. We have a writing class. We have internships for students who are looking to get an internship. And we also offer application counseling. So right now we are working with our, you know, our 11th graders who are getting ready to transition into 12th grade. And we are having, you know, new rising seniors getting on board right now. And in this program, you're working with a former admissions officer, so somebody like Erica, who has read and evaluated applications at the highest level, and a graduate coach who's a trained writer and editor. And we are working with you from start to finish on the college application process. So we are working with you on building your school list. So taking all of the lessons that we learned today and putting that into practice with you, helping you brainstorm and edit your personal statement, you know, edit your activities list, making sure we're making a big impact in a small space there, tailor your supplemental essays, interview preparation, and all of that. So that is something that is that students should get started on with now, because, you know, applications will be coming up before you know it. So if you're interested in, you know, if you have any questions about your profile or about your child's profile, we are happy to set up a one-on-one conversation. In that conversation, we will ask you a lot of questions about your background. We will provide you feedback based on your answers to those questions. We'll answer any questions that you have, and we will talk about how our programs might be a good fit for you. So if you are interested in doing that, you can email me directly. This is my email address, and I can set that up with you this week or next week, or at your earliest convenience. So now, thank you all for staying on until the end. I know we ran a little bit late here, but happy to answer any questions that you have. So let's see. Best advice for a student who doesn't know what major to pursue. Erica, do you want to answer that, or?
Yeah, I think I would start the conversation as far as, your current classes. Which ones do you get really excited about? When was the last time you felt really excited in school? What were you learning? What were you doing? I also think looking at their extracurricular activities. Do they tend to do things that are more artistic or humanities based? Do they tend to do things that are more, robotics club or building? That's definitely where I would start the conversation. There's always the option of choosing undecided, but for a lot of schools in supplemental essays, they will still ask you, what do you want to study and why? So you do need to kind of narrow down your interests, and I think it really starts with a conversation and lots of questions from a counselor to see where the student's excitement and passion lies. And that's something that's very common with a lot of students that I work with. It takes some time to definitely narrow down which major is going to be the right fit.
Yep, thank you. How do you decide which school to apply to early decision?
Well, I think you have to be really sure. I think doing all of that research that Yosefa went over, visiting if possible, meeting with the admissions rep if they come to your school, gathering as much information as possible. And it has to feel like home. Of course, there are some people that look at it really strategically and look at admissions rates and regular decision versus early decision, but it is a commitment. It's a binding commitment. So you have to be sure that it feels like home and that you would be extremely happy there.
I also will add that it's a much bigger advantage than applying like REA, for example. So if you are deciding between Yale and Columbia or something like that, and those are your two favorite choices and you would be extremely happy to go to both schools, you have a bigger advantage applying to Columbia early because it is binding than you do at Yale, where you're much more likely to get deferred and then reevaluated in the regular decision pool. So I do think that early decision versus early action strategy is super important, and I think doing a lot of research early on to figure out which school it is, which school is your top choice school and you would be absolutely thrilled to go to if you got in. And if you have one of those schools, then you should certainly apply early decision. Okay, we have another question. I think I'll make it a little bit more general for the purpose of everybody in the audience, but for students who move around a lot and have gone to a lot of different high schools, perhaps because of their parents' jobs, how is that evaluated in the admissions office?
So admission reps, they want to hear about that. They want to hear your story. They want to know the context of your education. If I see a student just jumping from school to school and I have no information, it might be something that I'd question and say, what's happening here? I think it would definitely be something that the student could write about. It brings a unique background and experience. So the student should definitely make that a big piece of their application.
Yeah, and I think the fact that you or the student has moved around a lot, that is not necessarily unique. I think the work that we would do is reflecting with the student and digging in and saying, okay, how has this shaped your perspective on things? What skills has this given to you? For example, I bet the student is very good at making friends and adapting to a new environment. And those are all super valuable skills to have. So we want to dig in and see like, okay, this is the situation at hand. How has that shaped you? How has that, shaped your perspective and how you'll contribute to a classroom? So it's not just, the facts, it's what does that mean? What does that say about the student? Okay, next question. When is the best time to enroll with Ingenious? So I think it depends on the student and the family. When students come to us right before senior year, there are things we can do to mold and shape what they've done, but we can't actually change their experiences or, shape their resume. So that is, why we created our candidacy building program, is to work with students earlier on. I think for rising seniors, now is the time to be starting to get started on this process. We'll start on the college applications with our students from midway through June through July 1st is our official starting period. So that is, now is the time to ask questions and decide if you would want to work with us. Next question would be, is having a strong interest in a less common major a hook for the most competitive colleges? I think this is a very good question, and I think a lot of our other presentations are more about application strategies and how to create a successful application. And one of the main takeaways from that presentation is okay, students need to be unique and they need to stand out. So if you are interested in marine biology, that is a more specific and perhaps more interesting major than just regular biology. Or if you're interested in Russian literature, that is something that not a lot of high school students are interested in. And so if you do have a very specific academic interest, then that is certainly something that will help you stand out. I also think kind of what Erica was mentioning in terms of Johns Hopkins having a good creative writing program. So MIT also has a good creative writing program. And I think that if you're interested in creative writing, maybe you wouldn't think MIT was a good fit for you or Johns Hopkins, but there are probably less applicants with similar profiles to you applying. And so, in comparison to everybody else, you'll stand out. I also think, perhaps if you're interested in computer science, for example, Yale is not extremely strong in computer science and is really investing a lot in the program and trying to strengthen the department. And so they're, looking for strong STEM students. And so I do think having very specific and strong interests is an advantage and something that we work towards with students. And it will help students stand out. And I also think understanding, the ins and outs of different schools and not just thinking oh, Johns Hopkins is school for pre-meds. Really understanding the different schools is important. All right, I think we will do maybe one last question, which is, Erica, I'll give this to you, is in what cases have you seen a student get into their REACH schools? Or what does it take to get into your REACH school?
Yeah, so when you apply to REACH school, obviously your testing and your GPA need to be very, very strong. But that's how all the other applicants that are going to be admitted, they're going to come to the table with strong academics. So it doesn't set you apart at REACH schools. It's necessary. It has to be there, but it's not the thing that's going to get you admitted. It's usually an interesting background, a unique academic interest, an example of outstanding leadership, a commitment to community service that has made a huge tangible, impact on a community. Somebody that has a compelling, interesting story so that when I go into committee, I can summarize who this student is and give, 3 or 4 examples very easily. I think that's what we work on with our students. And that's the students that have been able to follow that advice have been the most successful at their REACH schools.
Awesome. I will answer one more question, and if I did not get to your question, please send me an email and I will answer you directly. Some of the questions are a little bit more like individualized, so I will answer those directly via email. If you think of anything else, just send me a message and I'll answer in the next 24 hours or so. So the last question I will answer is, how is Ingenious Prep different from other consultants? So I would say first and foremost would be our team of former admissions officers. So we have over 150 people who have worked and made decisions at the highest level at, top 20 schools in the United States. So these were actual decision makers. They were not secretaries or people who just read applications. These are people who, participated on the committee and shaped classes at these top schools. And from that, they know, what these schools are looking for and what they are not looking for. And they work directly with our students. Because we have so many of them, we're able to keep a lower student to counselor ratio than many of our competitors. I'd also stress and emphasize our curriculum. So we've spent a lot of time and a lot of resources putting together very comprehensive curriculum that's, operational and also substantive. So to guide our counselors and our students to make sure that they have all of the resources necessary behind them to provide a high level service. I think we also, like our resources, we have over 75 professors, researchers, and scholars who provide our students with one-on-one research opportunities. And I also think we just approach the process a bit more creatively and intensely than some other companies, but I could probably talk about this for a long time, but I will not bore you all. You've stayed on with us long enough. And yeah, I think that probably sums it up, but really appreciate you all staying with us tonight and listening to our presentation. Erica, thank you for joining us as well. It was great to have you. And yeah, I look forward to speaking with you all later on. Have a great night, everybody.